Denise Matteau here for Visions of Mercy. Another episode concerning Tiffany Jenks, Faith Jackson, and in this video, the issue of cults. John S. Captain, the man who is really dedicating himself to justice in the Tiffany Jenks murder case, is highly invested in the theory, and it is only a theory, that Tiffany Jenks may have been a monarch slave. I hesitate to use that phrase to describe anybody because I'm not 100% sure what it means, and I really don't care to explore it too far. It is associated, and those who are interested can Google it and see. There are some people like Clyde Lewis and David Icke, am I pronouncing his name right? I-C-K-E. And other people in that realm who have done a lot of work on that. So you can Google it and find out what they're talking about. It is associated with something I'm fully aware of, which is the MKULTRA project, okay? And the Monarch Project was part of that. Now, those were real organizations or entities. Those were projects that were run by the CIA. That was a real government-funded project. It was even investigated and ordered closed by Congress back in the 70s. But the MKUltra project is one of those things that took on a life of its own. And spiritually, it has affected the life of the United States very deeply. Tiffany Jenks is not the only bright young mind to be snuffed out by a control-crazed cult, which is what MKUltra ultimately became. This is the thing, okay? As a project of the government, MKUltra was another department. It did things that were found to be highly illegal, unethical, and horrific, actually, horrible things to people. The government removed support and ordered the men who were doing it, the men and women, to stop. But once a certain level of group activity is engaged in, it continues. The government can say, stop this, but the people who are running it may not stop. At that point, they become a cult. They may already have been a cult inside the CIA because people obviously got angry and made them stop. Once the government pulled out, they continue. John S. Captain, the man who is seeking justice for Tiffany Jenks, is highly invested in exposing that cult. And God bless him, he's got a lot of material to do it. I have faced the cult in a more general sense, and I suppose some may say I faced some MKUltra personnel on the East Coast. I don't know if I did or not. I know that I did face military people in my family circles, and among my friends. I know that I faced political cult because I actually became a member of one. There's a cult called Natlfed, N-A-T-L-F-E-D. That was also rumored to be a CIA project. That cult is a political social group that runs food pantries. It's highly involved out in Oakland, California, Portland, and Boston, and Berkshire County, Massachusetts. It's got its West Coast arm and its East Coast arm. I was involved in the Berkshire County end, Berkshire County Fuel Committee, Western Mass Labor Action. Both of those entities, and that's what they officially called themselves, operated out of the food pantry in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I worked there in that food pantry. So, what happened, had I remained a member of that cult, I would probably be in some political position today. because people tended to go into the cult, be community organizers. There was one out of Chicago who made it pretty high up in government, if you recall, a community organizer from Chicago. Community organizer was actually the official title of the front line of that cult. And what we would do as community organizers is these would be the members of the cult who made public speeches, who ran for local office, who rose up the political ladder, even into Washington, D.C. Saul Alinsky is one of the political theorists, a college professor who's written some books. Rules for Radicals, one of Hillary Clinton's favorite books. That Rules for Radicals is the Bible of the political arm of the same cult that John S. Captain is looking at as MKUltra. Now, what's the difference between MKUltra, which John S. Captain believes controlled Tiffany Jenks before she died, and Nattlefied, which tries to control me and was very threatening for many years to me? What's the difference between these two? Here's the difference. MKUltra was an inside deep project of the American government, official level, officially funded, people with official credentials, CIA level, security clearances, suits and ties, okay? And they had power, very official power. And Tiffany Jenks would have been more interesting to them than to the political group like Nattlefied, which was also active in her area, because she wasn't important in the social life of the city. She had a technical job involving 21 dams in the BPA power system. Now that level of, I don't know what to call it, but that level of expertise, that position, is of much more interest to an official group like the MKUltra crowd than it is to the street politicals of the Nattlefied. But had there been something going on between the hydroelectric and the street, the Nattlefied would be stepping in to do the demonstrations and the interface with the population. The technical side is the government-controlled side. MKUltra no longer officially exists. It was disbanded by the government back in the 70s. But the MKUltra legacy still continues today in the form of a kind of psychological cult that people recognize when they see government control and government, the shadow government level, where, you know, if your local mayor told you you couldn't do something, that's overt, and you might get up and you know, vote him out of office, speak against it, write editorials. But the shadow level is where the mayor is telling you you're a wonderful person, but all of a sudden you can't, the water to your house is suddenly not working and nobody can figure out how to fix it. And it becomes inexplicable. You know, they get in behind you. Now, we don't know everything that happened to Tiffany Jenks, but we know a lot more than you would in most cases. So John S. Captain is looking at that. Now, in my daughter's death, the cult that I had been involved with and I left was not directly involved because I recognized that it was a cult. While I was a member of it, I was at the level of blaming the people around me for being weird. But I had been pulled aside by some older people in several cases. Originally in my youth by my father, I had been warned ahead of time that I might face something like this. And when I started to realize Daddy was right, there was another person, somebody I was responsible for contacting with on behalf of the cult, who was waiting for an opportunity to witness to me the same way and explain the kind of cult it was. You couldn't escape this cult. And some older people used their position to warn cult members who were sent to them. We would go to their houses and get money and visit, and they were useful people under the disguise of supporting a charity, under the disguise of supporting a food pantry. And the reason I was involved with the food pantry was I was a producer at Channel 5 Television in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the public access community television. And there was somebody, an assistant manager of that station, who was also pretty much in charge of the food pantry. And I had learned at work that if I wanted full use of video production equipment, and I wanted my career that I was embarking on, if I wanted my career as a producer to go forward, the thing to do was put as much of my spare time as possible into kissing the boss's butt by volunteering at the food pantry. And I thought it was a fair trade-off. A little bit of brown-nosing, but at least I was helping people. I saw no problem with it. The cult control came in later. And when I saw the problem, I got out. And I followed the advice of a homicide detective who was familiar with the situation, familiar with my family, because my family had other people involved in the cult. Cults love families, you know. They can't get you, your brother or your sister will get you. They love it. The police knew my family because one of my nephews was involved in a double homicide in 1981. He was acquitted. He was an accessory anyway. He didn't actually do it. It was a group of 7 young men referred to as the Lennox 7, charged with conspiracy. Drowned 2 men in Laurel Lake in Lee. Look it up. I think if you Google New York Times Lennox 7, you might find one of the old stories. Anyway, I was able, because of that, in the 1990s, when I realized I had been sucked into a real serious cult, I was able to turn to one of the people who knew my family and tell them what was going on. At that point, I had risen enough to have witnessed some very serious financial transactions. My work as an artist, my work at the television station, I was trying to produce an art program. I started to witness all kinds of stuff, all of it cult involved, all of it financial, most of it also government involved. And I was terrified. And this detective, now retired, gave me the advice of accept the fact that your life is going to change, but be real open. He said, when these people are using blackmail, they're using fear, they're going after your daughter. She was in high school at the time. He said, the best thing to do is be so open that they are not going to want you to so much as stub your toe. They are going to tell everyone to not hurt you because everyone's looking at them. And so that's what I did. Unfortunately, my daughter didn't fully understand it, and they did get to her. And she didn't leave Massachusetts. But the cult aspect in both cases is entangled, and it's entangled spiritually because the spiritual touch comes when somebody at the upper level of the cult insists that you give up your spiritual beliefs. And at the time, I had God on the back shelf. If you ask me what I believe, I say, oh yeah, Jesus is real, but I'm too busy to deal with that now. That's for people that need Sunday morning activities. I really didn't care. But when someone really pushed it, I cared. Over and out.